Hello again. All right, we're going to talk about brain scans, I believe, today. So let's go ahead and do this thing and go ahead and get this created. Hold on just a second. All right, we're going to go ahead and share the screen. We're going to get started. Let's do this. Okay. All right, so this will be pretty short and sweet. This is one of my favorites of the readings that I got when I was at UK or EKU. And it's entertaining to me because she doesn't just write as a social scientist, she doesn't just write as a scientist in general. There's definitely personality in her writing. She's got some serious snark and it's entertaining to the reader. So it's good to make sure that we're paying attention to that. This article, some of the things I want you to focus in on is how science can be misinterpreted and how data can be reflected in a way that is incongruent with what the findings actually say, and to make sure that you are paying attention to how you use data and how when you get a statistics, whether it be in the news, whether it be in social media, whether it be in any of your classroom settings, that you are paying attention to how that data is being delivered, where that information is coming from, and that those two things match, because they don't always. And statistics can be used and can be very misleading. And I've got a couple resources on that. If you would like me to send them to you, I'm more than happy to. In fact, I might put them up just as helpful hints. Also, I want to talk about, especially when it comes to how different that binary system, and I talk about it a lot. There's this understanding that gender or that sex or that just humanity is very binary, in multiple ways. When we talk about gender, we're talking about this male and female dynamic, that they're so opposing opposites and that there is no similarities. There's not as many congruences, when that's just not the case. Nothing in research, nothing in history, nothing in science has proven that. So what we're going to talk about today is how similar our brains are, how similar male and female brains are, how much overlap there is, and why that similarity is so much more important to an extent and never emphasized as the little bit of difference that might be there. And again, what that difference really means. Is that difference more due to gender? Is that due to more size? And what most research is saying is that it has more to do with the size of the brain and the size of the body than it does necessarily the than the gender of that person in general. And that it's incredibly hard to differentiate gender based on just brain scans. This is important, right? We put so much emphasis as a society on this idea that there is such an inherent difference, that there is a biological constructive difference that is so hammered in stone, is unwilling and is unmoving and doesn't change. This is not the case. Stop with that. If you can take your brain for a second and just chew on the fact and the idea that we are not inherently opposites from someone that is gender that is different than ours, then that in of itself allows you the space to be able to open up and really understand the world and how these constructions of gender, these ideas that are so reinforced, and where we learn them and how and what benefits from them. And that will help you as we talk through oppression, as we talk through especially systemic oppression. These understandings rooted in historic lack of science-based knowledge really have shaped and molded how we even do science, why we're still consistently looking for these dramatic differences, right? And so I want to talk through some of that, okay? And this really does a good job of examining all the science. I'm not going to hash out all the individual examples because, again, I want you to read it because it's important for you to read these things. I'm just going to get you the main things that we want to talk about when we're looking at it, so that you can go back and read it and understand why I'm saying the things that I'm saying on this screen. There is an incredible amount of overlap between our understandings of what we know about how a brain operates, how it's systemic. There is nothing more similar to, okay, let's say this differently. There is more variation based on the size of the individual, based on this, within a category of gender than there is between the two, right? So think about it this way. We're looking at the size of a brain, size of this. There's going to be, based on body size, shape, how there's going to be differences, right? There's going to be differences across the continent, across not even just the continent, across the world, based on what works better for a specific ecosystem, for a specific climate, for a specific genetic line. And there's variation even within that, right? These variations lead to, if you looked and gathered, like say just 100 male brains from across the world and put them up to 100 female brains across the world, and you just mixed and matched and did the brain scans and then really put them all in a lineup, there's not going to be a distinct way for scientists to be like, this brain scan was in that female group, this brain scan was in the male group, this brain was this. They are not going to be able to do that conclusively, and that is the point we are trying to make, okay? Also, understand that neuroscience has been used inappropriately at times to reinforce that binary, and I think that this article, or well, this chapter in this book, because they do it on a much more wider scale throughout the whole book, but this specific chapter is good in helping us understand how science can be misleading and how science can be used, like the studies themselves may not be misleading, but if they're used in a misleading way by someone who has an inherent purpose that is not necessarily incongruent with the research they use, how it can be very, very harmful and produce messages that are just false. So I also, again, want to touch on the fact that in the very beginning, she explains the four steps to creating good neuroscience. And I think that they are incredibly important and they're interesting. And those are kind of help you get through the hiccups that happen throughout the rest of the research that they talk about, or the ways the research was used more prominently. And I want you to look for and specifically look at how these, especially when we talk about the spectrum of hormone levels, the spectrum of things like that, have been used in oppressive ways. We just got done with the Olympics. I think that it is pertinent to kind of talk about that. And one of the things we'll talk about as we get into one of our optionals is how these things are connected. But when we have, and there is historic roots in this, again, we have this way of mapping out when females are doing really, really well. Other teams or even teammates, or even the institutions of the Olympics or places like that itself, will start testing their hormone levels to see if they're predominantly male, with the understanding or this false narrative that men are so much better in sports, that if she's excelling this much or being so much better than the other females in the category, then clearly there is something male about it. So, and this has been used to discredit many an athlete, when we have then gone back and looked at these normal ranges of hormone levels, which again we talked about in the last, as we talked about in the last video, have overlap. That has then become this oppressive force to create or stop greatness, and that's inappropriate. It's oppressive, and it's something that we need to make sure doesn't continue, and we need to really examine why we're strategically looking at this way. And it really boils down to, if we keep that binary and they are inherently opposite, then clearly this person who is excelling more at this thing, specifically sports, is this. Now, again, there's a wide range. Every female Olympic athlete can kick 70, I'm going to say more than that, probably 90% of most of the male athletes in the world. Why? Because they're the elite of the elite of the elite. So saying that there's like this inherently male thing about sports, and notice that you will never see in the historic links of this, and as you if you read that optional one, which I suggest, or you do any research on how the Olympics has gone about this, you will never find that they do this to the male athletes. Well, you didn't perform as much, so you must have some female hormonal levels in you, or you must not have a level of testosterone that we accommodate for men. So clearly we're going to test. There's never that. Or even, hey, you're excelling. So maybe your hormonal levels are not as good as the rest, right? But there is research to show that specific hormones, especially when it comes to how you metabolize things, how you even metabolize air within your systems and within your blood, have health. Like there's genetic things that do provide some advantages, but those things are not tested or discredited against. They specifically are working towards only how gender plays a role in this. And we want to make sure that we're paying attention to these things and as gender scholars and as we grow within this field and our understandings of gender, that we're paying attention to how those things play out in our real world at a macro level, and both how they take away the rights and oppress individuals at an individual level. Okay, so read it. It's funny, it's snarky. I think that you will enjoy it, and we will touch base again soon. I hope you have a great day.